So, as a partially defrocked college professor, let me parse the question before us into four. There's first of all the empirical question. What is actually going on? And I don't think there's any significant doubt about the fact that if you divide post-war American history into two equal chunks, that in the second chunk, the last 33 years, we have become a very significantly more unequal society. Between 1979 and 2007, the top 1% in the United States, correcting for taxes, government transfers, inflation, and changes in household size, has seen an income increase of 281%. Median households have seen an increase of 25%. If you want a summary economically for the past, say, 30 years of American history, the top has been soaring, the middle class has been stagnating, and the bottom has been stuck. And there are processes underway that are likely to replicate that pattern, which is even more serious than the pattern itself for the reasons that Charles has previously stated. But economic inequality is not just a statistic. It has implications for economic classes and for class consciousness, to use a Marxist term. And there's no question about the fact that the consciousness of class conflict in the United States has risen quite dramatically, even in just the past few years. I reviewed a Pew Research Center survey recently that showed that just between 2009 and today, the percentage of Americans seeing strong or very strong conflict between the rich and the poor in the United States has risen from 47% to 66%. That is a very abrupt change in a short period of time. And interestingly, most of that change has occurred among white Americans, whose perception of that conflict has risen from 43% to 65% during that same period. So something is happening. That's the first question, the empirical question. And when you add to that the fact, which has been, I think, well demonstrated, that whatever may have been the case in the past, social mobility in the United States is now well below average for OECD countries. If social mobility is the heart of the American dream, then the American dream is in jeopardy because of the trends that we're here to discuss today. Question number two, I'll be much briefer. The normative question, does this matter? My answer is yes, absolutely. First, for the reasons that Benjamin Disraeli gave in Britain in the 19th century, that Condoleezza Rice gave last night in her framing speech, and that Charles Murray just gave this morning. One nation, two nations. It makes a big difference. But more immediately, there is a lot of political science evidence to the effect that growing economic divergences are contributing to this pattern of deeply and increasingly polarized politics that we've seen, and you've all seen the results of the polarized politics, the inability of the United States to come to agreement and to govern itself on the most fundamental questions we face. Third question, and this is where I guess the argument will begin, is what I'll call the diagnostic question. Why is this happening? And let me just say, and I don't have time to go into details now, but just as a headline, I refuse to choose among economic explanations, social and cultural explanations, and political explanations. All three of those sectors of our collective life have had an important impact on the phenomenon of economic inequality and increasing class consciousness and class conflict. I have studied family policy passionately for 25 years. Everything that you've just heard is true, but it's important to understand that it is not just the case that social patterns produce economic patterns. It is also the case that economic changes produce or at least contribute to the changing social patterns that are then replicated economically in the next generation. So things like family structure, parenting styles are both, in social science language, independent variables and dependent variables. They are both causes and effects, and it's important as this conversation goes forward not to oversimplify that relationship. The fourth question is the prescriptive question, what should we do? And that's above my pay grade, so I will stop here.